Hey guys, today we're talking about image stabilization for video and comparing it with a couple of cameras due to specific conditions. Check it out.
Behind you with like the clouds, the sky and everything, and still be able to see. We've got the Rode video mic. Here we go. M50. What do you guys think?
Alright, so now I'm in an interesting setup today because today I wanted to experiment with which camera that I own specifically would give me the best results for image stabilization during video for far conditions. Long story short, if I'm going to do a shoot, and I was recently called for a shoot and they said just bring one camera, not too much equipment. Normally I would take a gimbal, but this time I wouldn't be able to take a gimbal for this type of shoot because I have to keep my equipment very light and very small. So I'm like, okay, I need to bring the best camera for long distance shooting, especially for this specific type of like video shoot. So I have a 5D Mark IV, I've got the Samsung NX1, and I've got the GH5. Now, I wasn't going to bring my BMPCC 4K into this mix because the BMPCC 4K completely lacks image stabilization, and I don't have any lenses that are native for the BMPCC 4K. All I've got is the metabones speedbooster. So it's basically going to be in last place because even the electronics wouldn't fully communicate with it. Whereas the GH5, again, I don't have any native micro four thirds lenses. With the GH5, it already has in-body image stabilization, which puts it ahead of the BMPCC 4K, so I'm taking that out of the mix anyway. So right now we're going to start off with a couple of tests. First I'm going to start off with the Samsung NX1. Now the Samsung NX1, the best lens that I have with goes up to 150 millimeters on the lens, which is equivalent to a full frame 225 millimeters. I'm going to go as far as I can. And now with the Samsung NX1, I've got not only stabilization built in on the lens, but I've also got digital image stabilization. I'm going to use a combination of both image stabilization from that and the lens to zoom in on. I pretty much have a couple of things on my kitchen that actually are just standing still. I'm going to zoom in all the way. That's why I'm at this background rather than my normal studio. So I can zoom in on it and then see how much shake I have when standing perfectly still. Because in the situations that I'm going to be in, especially when I'm zoomed in, I'm not going to be walking. I'm going to be standing still. So then I'm going to do some tests where I'm actually like recording vloggity vlog style. And that I will use a shorter lens and see how much shake I get when I'm just holding it handheld. Because you want the best of both worlds, especially if I've got to travel light. So without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to start with the Samsung NX1. There's a lot of math involved when it comes to dealing with the lenses and what's a focal length that's equivalent to another focal length. And I'm going to use all of them at an equivalent focal length so we can get the most decent comparison when it comes to the three cameras. So starting off with the Samsung NX1, I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to set the focal length to 150. And 150 is equivalent to 225 millimeters full frame. And now I'm recording off the Samsung, and I've got digital and optical stabilization turned on. So it's dual image stabilization. I'm holding it as steady as I possibly can while zoomed all the way in. Now, I don't think the results are that bad, especially with zoomed in all the way in. There's obviously shake, but it's a little bit more smoother. And I can tell you that my hands are shaking a lot more than what the footage is. Not bad at all with the Samsung, especially with the dual image stabilization, with the optical working well with the digital image stabilization. Now moving forward, we're going to try the Canon 5D Mark IV. Now when it comes to the Canon 5D Mark IV, there's a couple of little bit more math tricks to get the same 225 millimeter full frame focal length into consideration. The 5D Mark IV, and I'm going to test it with 4K, 5D Mark IV is crops in at 1.74 times. So when actually getting the same field of view, I have to have it set at roughly 128 millimeters on the actual lens. Now the 5D Mark IV also does not support in-body image stabilization, but the lens does. So let's see how well the lens alone performs when compared to the Samsung NX1. Now zooming in about 128 millimeters. And this is handheld with lens stabilization only. And again, I'm shaking. This camera's a little heavier. I'm still shaking a bit, but it is what I got with the image stabilization. Just for entertainment purposes, I'm going to zoom in all the way with this lens because I have the ability to zoom in a lot farther than my NX1's lens. Going all the way up to 300. Now with 300, you notice a lot more shake. Trying to hold it perfectly still with this shot. You still notice a lot more shake, but not that bad. Pretty impressed with the Canon 5D Mark IV, actually, and the image stabilization built in on the lens. Now we're going to try the GH5, but I'm going to have to switch cameras to try out the GH5. One sec. For this particular shot, I've got the GH5. The GH5 zoomed in needs to be at 176 millimeters on this lens thanks to the metabones speed booster that's attached to it plus the crop factor of this sensor, which is 2 times. So it's 2 times 0.64. Then you get what I just told you, which was, and I forget so easily, it was 176 millimeters. So I'm going to zoom into 176 millimeters. Now when it comes to the actual image stabilization, I've got stabilization on, and I've also got IS lock because for these specific shots, I'm not going to be moving or walking. So IS lock might actually help when it comes to the stabilization, especially for this particular type of shot. So that's the benefits that you get off of the GH5, which is awesome. Now, and I've also got, because of the metabones speed booster, I've got the stabilizer on this lens, which I use with the Canon, on as well. So we're going to see if this actually has a benefit when recording. Here we go. The autofocus is annoying, so I'm just going to switch it on to manual before that panicked on me. Sorry about that. Now let me hold the shot here. And stabilization is not too bad, actually. Holding it at this particular shot. You know, it's going to be close. Again, I'm holding this just like I held the Canon and the Samsung. You know, talking while holding it. But it's going to be close because it's going to really test my waters when it comes to what's acceptable for a shake. But all three don't do such a bad job. Now I'm going to zoom in all the way. This is as far as I could zoom in on the Panasonic. And it doesn't do a bad job either. The Panasonic really, let me try holding it still right now and trying not to move. And there you go. This is gonna be a tough call. Now, when it comes to the stabilization on all three, they do a pretty darn good job. Even the 5D Mark IV with the stabilized lens didn't do a bad job at all, but I do think that the Samsung and even the GH5 with the metabones speed booster had a one-up on the image stabilization. But now we're going to go into vlogity mode. Alright, so that was the GH5, and now we're going to do selfie vlogity vlog style with the shorter lens, and I'm going to start off with the NX1. Basically going to see what it looks like with image stabilization on and digital image stabilization on when I'm doing vlogity style on the Samsung NX1. So holding it in front and seeing what my results are like this. Now I'm going to look at all this footage after I'm done and see how steady the digital image stabilization does. Now I'm holding this at 15 millimeters, right? No, actually, excuse me. Not 15, 16 millimeters. And then I'm going to use an equivalent focal length on all the different cameras. So I'm going to look at this right now to see how well this actually performs. So now holding it, it actually did a darn good job. My hand was shaking, but I'm impressed. It looks like it was perfectly still. You cannot tell that this is handheld footage at all. I'm amazed. I am honestly amazed actually with this footage. It looks like I'm holding it on a tripod. It looks like tripod footage. Very impressive on the NX1. For a 16mm shot, we're gonna have to do that math again for the 5D Mark IV. And 16mm is around 13.75 or 14mm on the 5D Mark IV due to the crop in the 4K. Let's actually switch out the lens and see what we get. One thing I want to add on to when it comes to the 5D Mark IV filming like this is the fact that this lens that I'm going to use also does not have image stabilization. So this is pretty much going to be a loss for the 5D Mark IV. Holding it selfie style just like I did the Samsung NX1, and we'll see what type of results I get by holding it like this, but I can tell you my hand's shaking just like it did with the NX1. But due to the lack of in-body image stabilization or stabilization on the lens, it doesn't look practical for me to take the Canon. So the Canon, even before I look at it, is probably out. But let's see how well I did. So I'm playing the footage. While looking at this footage, I can tell you one thing. I can see the shake. Now, the more zoomed out you are, the less that you notice a shake, right? And if I'm seeing the shake and I'm playing the shake, I'd think, okay, it's not that bad. The shake itself is still kind of usable, but it's not crazy. But the moment you start walking, it would not be acceptable. Yeah, looking at the footage while I'm looking at it, it just doesn't look as smooth. But again, it's the fault of the Canon not having in-body image stabilization, and then my own fault for having a lens that has no stabilization. So I crippled myself on this one. From a zoom perspective, it was great. It surprised me. But from a wide angle vloggity vlog style, didn't beat the NX1. So moving on, let's go to the GH5. All right, now it's time for the GH5. Now the GH5, again, I'm using the metabones speedbooster, and this lens, which is the same lens I used on the Canon, it does not have image stabilization. Now, looking at the chart that I wrote down here, I'm going to have to be at around 19mm to get the equivalent of what I had on the Samsung and the Canon. Now, the one advantage that the Samsung had is that even that lens had image stabilization, whereas with 19mm on the Panasonic, on this lens, it will not get you image stabilization automatically. The one advantage that I do get, though, is a flippy screen. So I've got the same settings on the stabilization that I had for the long range. I put it on manual focus because this lens is atrocious when it comes to autofocus and metabones speed booster. So now I'm going to start recording. So now I'm basically recording with the GH5 handheld, one arm, and I'm shaking a lot, just like I did with the Samsung and with the 5D Mark IV. And the 5D Mark IV turned out to be unusable with this lens. But with the GH5, I'm sure that it will reduce some shake, and that's what I'm hoping for. So right now, I think the 5D is completely cut off. And we're gonna see how this does. I'm gonna stop recording, and let me look at the footage that I just recorded right now. Amazing! With the GH5 and with this non-stabilized lens, it looks like I have a stabilized lens, basically. It's not moving at all, and my hand was shaking. From a vlog standpoint, the NX1 and the GH5 are neck and neck, and the GH5 did not have any stabilization on the lens, while the Samsung NX1 did. So that in itself is pretty amazing. The NX1 has a bit more motion. A bit more. I'd say the GH5 kind of edges it out. I did not expect that, to be honest. I thought that the lens mixed with the digital stabilization would be better, but then this is basically designed to do that, and I was able to zoom in closer. I guess that's not a surprise. I've tested the GH5 with image stabilization before, but against these cameras, but I needed to do a refresher for just to encourage myself to see which one was that much more reliable. And it seems that the GH5 continues to pull in that advantage. Added with the fact that the GH5 also has 4K 60, it has the flip out screen, but I will also say that the Samsung NX1 with the digital stabilization mixed with the optical stabilization in its lenses does a fantastic job as well. So it's still, for me, is still a toss-up. What puts the GH5 over the edge is that not only is it slightly better, edging out the Samsung, but it also has the flip screen. The one downside is dealing with inability to autofocus the way I like it, but that's what you get. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I want to give a thanks to everyone who's subscribed so far, and I apologize, I've had a cold for a little while and dealing with that. And as always, you can like, share, and make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. I got a couple of videos planned going forward, and might do some traveling. We'll see if that happens. See you guys later.